Hello everyone, I just want to talk about a couple new weapons that I kind of have been messing with recently. Also because I think they're interesting, and similar to the last one, I think they're unique. So let's start with it. We're going to start with the Synoid Simulor. This is a really interesting weapon. I have this as my base weapon build for it that is useful for like most frame. And then I have another build that we'll show in just a minute. This weapon has an augment that you get from the Night Wave. I'll show it on screen here. Essentially what it does is it makes it so that it doesn't bounce around, it just explodes automatically, and it will pull in the enemies that are in a large radius around it. So the explosion is, I believe, 5 meters, and it will pull all of those enemies in during that time. It's fine. It works. I mean, the weapon is fine. If you give it some buffs, it actually is decent. But this is kind of baseline. There are weapons that just do things better than this weapon. Also, make sure to turn off or turn down your energy brightness for this weapon. It is insanely bright. So now that it is fully stacked, let me show what it can do. It essentially does a lot of status procs. Electricity I find to be really nice because what it does is it'll pull enemies in, and then on the pull in it will trigger the electricity on all of the enemies nearby, and then they all get ticks. So the magnetic is nice for armor or for overcard stripping, and then the viral is good for damage amping all of the electric procs. It's actually pretty nice. However, the reason why I want to talk about this weapon is actually because I think with Zada's Blast, you get a significantly better explosion radius and damage with this weapon. So we're going to put it on Gauss. I have a build with Gauss that has both Zada's and Thermal Sunder with thermal transfer. So with these in mind, we can show what the grouping potential and the explosion radius is like. You'll notice that it doesn't pull in all of the enemies anyways. However, it does apply Zada's to literally every single enemy in that radius. So in the same vein, you could use this with somebody like Zaku. Subsume Thermal Sunder onto Zaku, and then use the new 4 augment with Zaku to pull enemies in, freeze the void debuff on them, and use it to spread really heavy amounts of void status. It'll give them the high vulnerability, it'll give them that double blast. It's actually pretty nice. I think it's gonna be really cool as a playstyle. The other thing about this is that the Synoid Simulor Orc also has a Cephalon Suda buff that gives you max energy and then restores energy. It does a small magnetic explosion. It's not really a big buff or anything, but it's nice to have. The alternate fire with the augment remove allows it to detonate all of the orbs automatically. It's neat. I do think the augment is better, all things considered. It's not going to make or break this weapon. I do think it's kind of interesting though, especially if you give it the right buffs, and I think Zada's Blast is kind of the way to go. Anyways, the next weapon I want to talk about is actually not that good of a weapon, and it's the Ballistica. The Ballistica itself is actually totally and utterly fine. I do think this weapon's worth building if you feel like you want to build it. This probably also isn't the best build for it either, but the reason why I wanted to build this weapon was specifically for its charge shot. This vectors. However, let me tell you, those they suck. They're terrible. They do very little damage. I don't believe they scale with enemy level. They get buffs from your weapons and stuff. Your weapon buffs like Nourish and Zada's and all that stuff. They don't have a really high status chance. So unless you could give them like a very high amount of status chance, you can't really make them do anything. And on top of that, they only last 7 seconds. This all culminates to the special effect of this weapon being just awful. So one thing I'll state that's really neat about this weapon is that when you scan Kavats for their codes, if you then kill them with a charge shot, it should spawn another one, though as far as I'm aware that was fixed, so I'll do it here again. So scan Ballistica, I don't even know where it went. It disappeared. Anyways, so that was something that was on the wiki for this weapon, and I decided to try it, and it doesn't seem to be working anymore. It used to for sure. I know that is something that a lot of people used to talk about, but as far as I'm aware, I haven't been able to get it to work. This is like recording number 5 or 6 of trying to get it to work, and it just doesn't, so unfortunate. I think it's just a better weapon if you just ignore this trait altogether and just fire it as you want. That said, it's not a bad weapon at all. I mean, you saw that I was killing stuff with it. If you have it built up and everything, it is a fine weapon to just fire. I suggest not using the charge shot and just firing it like quickly and just tap firing it. It will kill pretty quick. If you want to put some punch through on it, I think it's actually pretty good, especially if you can get a ribbon with punch through. that's probably the best place to get punched through from. It's fine. It's fine. The Spectres, from all of the testing I did, just never really scaled to the point that it was actually worth using them, especially because they just don't last long enough. And when I was testing these, and I had the AI on, we'll show that really quick. We'll also go invisible, and then unpause the AI. So if I go over here and kill one of these guys with a charge shot, it gets knocked down by the other enemies, and then by the time it gets up, it can do one ability or attack, and then it disappears because of how short the duration is. So unless you're actively going around and getting multiple of these guys, I don't even think it's worth it. Now I do think you could probably get this to one-shot these enemies with like Acuity, but I genuinely don't want to put more effort into this weapon. I've already put a bunch of form into it, and I don't even think I'm going to use it. I don't know, it's interesting. It's a very interesting weapon for sure, but it's definitely just kind of lagging behind. So I don't build this weapon. Alright, the next weapon I want to talk about really quick is the Pennant. Now there's a lot I want to say about this. I'm going to try to keep it as brief as I can so that I don't talk about this weapon for like 25 minutes. We're going to start with the build. This is an animosity build. Now there are two builds. I tried Influence. It's not as good. It doesn't have a really high status chance, so it kind of sucks. The reason why this weapon is really unique is because it has a passive where heavy attack kills grant 50% attack speed for up to 46 seconds, scaling with combo count. Now, the cool thing about this is that every kill you get gives you another 50% attack speed. These stats fall off individually, so let's say you've killed 3 enemies with a heavy attack, you get 150% attack speed. That's why there's no attack speed in this build. Now to start up on this weapon, it does kind of suck. I will be honest. It kind of sucks. Giving it some damage buffs is going to be really, really nice, but it's like really powerful. The other build is Afflictions. It is literally the same build, but with melee Afflictions instead. If you do want to swap out melee Elementalist, you're more than welcome to. I think for animosity builds specifically on this weapon, I think it's less important. And I think getting more raw damage, like Prime Fever Strike, is going to be more important just to getting regular kills. So we're going to show this build really quick. Essentially what you want to do with this weapon is you want to get a couple of early kills. We're going to use our Tennokai specifically here to give us our combo count, get some enemies that are low enough with the guaranteed forced slash proc on the heavy attack. And then we're going to try to find an enemy that has low enough health that we can one-shot with our heavy. Now the follow through isn't great, so you usually want to try and hit one enemy at a time. Once you're able and capable of killing 1 or 2 of these enemies with a heavy attack here, you'll get a significant attack speed buff, which allows you to get more heavy attack, which allows you to get more heavy attack kills, and it kind of just feedback loops into itself really, really heavily. So at 12x combo, our attack speed is really fast, so I can actually build up the Tennokai attacks really quickly, and then after a certain amount of time, you're kind of just hitting really, really fast, and then the heavy attacks are coming out as fast as our light attacks, which allows us to kill these enemies on that. Again, killing as fast as you can, really important for this weapon, because you only have 46 seconds. Now, I say only 46 seconds, that's a lot of time. At a certain point, you kind of just get into a rhythm, and I think this weapon is really fucking cool because of that. Giving it a couple of buffs, this weapon gets really silly. So if I take this and I put it on, say, Varuna, and put it on this build, which gives me a massive damage boost, crit chance, and status chance, I can literally walk up to these enemies, start a couple of attacks, break my invis, and then give myself the crit chance and damage and all that stuff that this weapon really, really likes, and then start doing multiple millions of damage to armored enemies. It is one of the best non-influence melee weapons in the game, in my opinion, and I don't see people talk about it enough. Really fucking fun weapon. It goes really fast at a certain point. It is just really fast, really fun. It's unique. It's not influence, so if anybody is looking for a non-influence weapon, this is it. The acquisition of this is a little rough. All things considered, it's really fun. Now, I'll show the other version. Afflictions, this version, it's going to kill faster on the heavy attacks, but it's not going to stack its passive as quickly. You'll notice that because it has a forced knock up and a forced slash on the heavy, we're triggering melee afflictions. Now, I do have a small damage buff on Varuna, but it gets sillier. So if I put it on her buff and then trigger that, we're doing 20 million on a slash proc. And of course this gets sillier and sillier the farther you go with buffs and stuff. I just think that this weapon is absolutely worth building just for the fun of being able to build a melee weapon that is not an influence weapon. Now, if you're looking for a Raven, I highly suggest getting range. Honest to God, adding more range to this weapon is important as hell. Now let's talk about the Tennokai mods, because the Tennokai mods are really important on this weapon. I think it's actually required. Discipline's merit is every 4 hits. That part is the most important part for this entire weapon. I would love to use Opportunity's Reach to give myself more range. However, every 4 hits, and part of this weapon that does the most damage being the heavy attacks, makes this basically required. The only other option I would suggest is Dreamer's Wrath. This increases the opportunity chance, and once we're attacking fast enough, this is totally fine. And the extra 32% crit damage is really funny, so you can kind of interchange these two, so long as you have enough attack speed. I'll show this other one just a little bit here. It will take longer to trigger, but it doesn't really matter as much. We're still just going to have really, really high damage. It might even trigger far more often sometimes. I still haven't actually gotten a single trigger for my passive yet, but sweeping these enemies with a single attack and killing a huge group of them is just so fun. I want to put more range on this. I literally have put Primed Reach and Spring-Loaded Blade for the extra, like, up to 8 meters range. If I could put Opportunity's Reach, I would, just to give it a total of 11 meters range. Yeah, just to give it a total of 11 meters range on the heavy attacks, but I do think just Discipline's Merit is worth it. Just being able to make it more consistent is far more important. Now, obviously, you can put an Umbral Forma in here and upgrade this to the next sacrificial pressure. It will give it more damage, surprise, that's how that works. But I already put 7 Forma into this thing, so I don't really want to put more right now. Maybe later. I will definitely be using this weapon for sure. That said, I think it's really funny. I'll show you one more thing really quick with this. It's really good on Galerbo. He is kind of the heavy attack king, and the fact that you can just kind of chain the enemies together and then heavy attack once and they will all die, makes it so that this weapon kind of doesn't have to do the build-up attack speed thing and just go into heavy attacks. It's very silly, yes. And the last weapon I wanted to talk about is the Heliocor. I'm gonna show a version of this weapon that is fine. It's fine. And the reason why it's fine is because of its unique trait. Now, I'm gonna put it on Mirage. This is who I would use with this weapon. And the reason being is because it is worth using specifically because Fatal strikes with this weapon perform a Codex scan. And that means that with all of the Mirage buffs, or, you know, Varuna or Kalervo, you can get kills with this weapon really easily, and every enemy that you kill with it will get scanned into the Codex. Well, that's really powerful for getting your scans for the Codex. So I think it's just worth building this weapon just for that alone. But on top of that, it's just a slam weapon. I don't know, slam weapons are really easy to build and are kind of fun sometimes. I went Afflictions. It's not going to trigger Afflictions that often. You could also go Duplicate if you want to get up the crit chance a little bit higher. I do have a Riven. The Riven's not necessary at all, as you can see just before that. I didn't go any crit, not really, simply because my Mirage actually has Radical Advance. You could swap out the Organ Chatter if you don't have that. You can swap out the Corrupt Charge. You can also just do this and go to actual crit build. This should put you at around 70% crit chance with the heavy attack slams, which will also give you enough crit damage, and then close to enough crit for melee duplicates. You can go with that as well if you'd like. That being said, I know this weapon is it's entirely mid, but just for the fact that it fatal scans on heavy, or it codex scans on heavy, or if fatal scan, or oh my god, it codex scans on fatal strikes is really, really powerful, especially for just clearing that codex. Like, my codex is, as you can see, I've missed a lot of things in this codex. I need to play with this weapon a little bit more. You can also do other frames. I mean, I know that there's other options. There's like Dante, and there's Orgaze, and there's a couple of other options that make it a little bit easier, but I don't really play Dante, and I don't really like using Orgaze outside of farming situations. However, I can see myself running around and slamming with this weapon, so this might be my way of doing it. But I do think it's worth mentioning because I think it's interesting enough that it's cool. Surprise, bet you thought this was 4 weapons? No, we're gonna talk about the Hema. This one is is not at all what the video is normally going to be about, but because it's kind of just got a bunch of things and I want to talk about it, it's getting in here. This weapon is not off meta. This weapon's fucking crazy. Why? Why is it? Why? Who possessed the people at Digital Extremes to give this weapon an augment? What the fuck? What are these people on? Why? Why? When? How? Who? Help? What is happening? This weapon is fucking crazy. Alright, now that I'm done crashing out, let's talk about it really quick. So this is a multiplicative condition overload weapon, meaning that the stacks of galvanized aptitude are going to be multiplicative to the base damage. If you want to know Riven build, this is what I suggest. You can also swap out Elementalist for the magnetic might mod, or magnetic capacity, or you can do actually radiation mod, radiated reload, and I think it's totally fine. Either way, you're probably going to just absolutely shred with this weapon. I like blast on this weapon specifically because it's kind of giving it the one thing that it doesn't really have, and the multiplicative condition overload makes the blast do a lot of damage. But let's talk about a couple of weird interactions with this weapon, because I think it's really genuinely interesting at how many frames this is going to work on. So first things first, let's talk about the punch-through interaction that happens with Zada's Whisper. So with projectile weapons, if you have punch-through, typically what happens is you will hit 2 targets, right? But with Zada's, if you hit 1 target with it, it tends to bend the bullets and send them flying in random directions. So if I shoot 1 burst into this crowd with Zada's active, it will send the projectiles flying in random directions, and when the target dies, it does that even more. So if we got a couple of stacks here of our galvanized aptitude, we now can just turn this weapon into what is essentially just a slightly worse Torrid Incarnate, because it is a little bit harder to use, I guess. I mean, it's crazy, but you know, here we are. That, and it gives it an additional status, so we're getting even more damage from galvanized aptitude. And then on top of that, it's doubling blast procs. So because our weapon is already wanting to be blast, we can just fire it at these enemies, get double the blast procs, double the AoE, the projectiles fly in random directions, proccing more blast, and then doing more damage, and we get additional status for galvanized aptitude. Fucking okay. Anyways, so then we'll talk about a couple of other things. I did talk about this in a short recently, but Trinity actually gets a huge buff off of this weapon. She gets to be able to cap out her champion's blessing augment without having to use the operator swap tech that's used to do with the companions. Now all you have to do is just empty your magazine, reload the weapon, and then you lose a bunch of health, which allows you to heal and gain about 50% based off of how much health you have of her champion's blessing augment. That's really crazy. Now I'm using Vigor to cap out both the shields and the health. We do get a 0.4 second increase to our shield gate duration because of Vigor. What was in this slot prior to this was primed redirection. I do think primed Vigor would go really well with this. Obviously, it's just going to make the shield gate window a little bit better, but it does just barely push past our cap for 690 health. You could also alternatively just use a blue shard, always entirely an option, but I like the idea that Vigor is an option, and I think it's really funny, so here we are. That, and I think Trinity is just tanky as fuck, and it doesn't really matter what she runs. The other small interaction I wanted to talk about that might not be as small as you think it is, Archon Intensify. So the problem with Archon Intensify is always that you need to heal actual health to get it to trigger. Now, the problem is, I can press my 4, and it will heal me, but I won't get Archon Intensify to proc. Now what will trigger is if I shoot a bunch with my Hema and then reload and then hit my 4, this will trigger Archon Intensify. Now this happens on any frame with healing. So it goes on Wisp, it goes on Oberon, it goes on Trinity, and any real frame that can actually use Archon Intensify now actually gets to just use a really fucking strong weapon and trigger Archon Intensify for 30% extra strength. That's really good. Now a couple things I'll mention. It doesn't work on Chroma. It does not trigger his Vex armor. I can like turn it on here and then I'll shoot it until it runs out and I won't get any stacks of my Vex armor. I don't know why this doesn't happen, but it's just the way it is. No stacks. The highest I've hit with this thing is I think 145 million with just like a couple of things and like a little bit of priming. Accidental priming, by the way, not real priming. So I don't know. This weapon is silly. I can't believe that they gave it an augment. This weapon was previously to this update already really fucking silly and capable of doing level cap content, and it is now just insane. I do not have words for how insane this was for them to add an augment to this. If you have any other really cool interactions with this weapon, please post it in the comments. Anyways, I yapped for way too long about the Hema, so that's it. I just wanted to make this quick yap video about all these weapons because I think they're fun and unique, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed.